and wanted on the table for a long time.
Yes, that's right. But of course, this is a new condition that Donald Trump appears to have added to this deal just 24 hours after it was announced. He now says the deal is totally subject to Saudi Arabia signing the Abraham Accords, that deal from his first term that saw several Arab countries normalise relations with Israel. Now, Saudi Arabia has repeatedly said it's not prepared to do that unless Israel recognises the state of Palestine, and Israel has no intention of doing that. But this is not just about sovereignty, Yalda. It's also about security. Avigdor Lieberman, a member of the Israeli parliament, former defence minister, potential candidate to be prime minister, said a civilian nuclear programme in Saudi Arabia will lead to a mad arms race across the Middle East. And that is indeed the risk, because there is no prohibition on Saudi Arabia enriching uranium for civilian purposes. But we also know it can be enriched to produce nuclear warheads. How much have we talked about that recently? And that's the big question for many people. Why would Donald Trump allow one country in the Middle East to do that when he is ostensibly at war with another to make sure they don't do that?
David, thank you so much. Well, Iran directed a not-so-veiled threat at the UK today, suggesting Tehran could target British air bases. That's after the new Prime Minister Andy Burnham confirmed he would allow the United States military to use RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire to launch strikes. In response, the Ministry of Defence said the armed forces stood ready to defend the country. So what would happen if the UK was threatened with imminent invasion? Well, exclusive polling by YouGov suggests only a handful of people in the UK would volunteer to fight. Those findings after it gathered the opinions of ordinary people from 7 different countries. Here's our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes.
Would you be willing to serve if this country was about to go to war? Apparently not. A new survey found that just 6% of people in the UK would volunteer to fight in the face of an imminent invasion. A further 14% of Britons would agree to serve if called up. But 17% said they'd refuse any order to defend their homeland, while a whopping 52% of people polled said they'd be ineligible because of age or disability. As for the chances of war, the YouGov survey shared exclusively with Sky News found that almost 1/3 of people, 29%, said they believe it's likely the UK will come under a full-scale military attack within the next decade. By contrast, though, the majority of respondents, 51%, saw such a threat as unlikely. They'll be hoping that they're right, as the poll exposed an extraordinary lack of confidence in the ability of the military to keep the UK safe should the worst happen. 53% of people said they were not confident their armed forces are strong enough to defend this place, while just over 1/3, 38%, said they were. In another interesting finding that will be music to the ears of the people in the Ministry of Defence, the survey discovered that 57% of the British public believe the government is spending too little on defence. 6%, just 6%, said they thought the defence budget was too big, while 17% thought it was about right. However, there was no agreement among the more than 2,300 British people surveyed on where any extra money to invest in the armed forces should come from. More than half said they opposed funding a bigger defence budget by raising taxes, by shifting expenditure in public services, or by borrowing more. So a big problem for the next government. YouGov also polled people in Poland, Canada, France, Germany, the US and Australia as part of its survey. Everyone was asked what they regard as the biggest global threat from a list of options, which included a military attack, but that only came out on top here in Poland. As for Britain, Canada and France, they saw the biggest threat as climate change. Germany said mass migration. In the US, it's political extremism, whereas in Australia, they viewed the biggest global threat as religious terrorism.
Deborah Haynes reporting there. The UK and all NATO members are under pressure from the US to increase defence spending, but the polling highlighted by Deborah there shows the citizens of NATO countries see America under Trump as a force for bad in the world. I've been hearing from Canada's Defence Minister, David McKenty.
Well, I think there's a discussion now, a more fulsome discussion in Canada about our security and our sovereignty, particularly when it comes to the Arctic. But we're very pleased to see, for example, one of the first things we did with the 2% spend was to give our armed forces the first significant pay rise since 1997. And so we increased wages between 8 and 20%, depending on rank. That's had a profound effect, we think. Plus a purpose. Canadians are feeling a stronger purpose to be able to serve, wanting to serve. That's why, for example, from last year to this year, two important statistics. We've seen a 13% increase in admissions to the armed forces, and we've seen a 61% increase in applications to join the Canadian Armed Forces year over year between this year and last year. These are astonishing numbers, the highest we've seen in about 45 to 50 years. Look, we're going forward. We will continue to manage our important relationship with the United States.
That was David McKenty there, the Defence Minister of Canada. And that's it for this week. We'll continue to monitor developments in India. What will the Prime Minister do? The World is back on Monday night from 9 o'clock. The wrap is next. Goodbye for now.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Tonight on The Wrap, early release on hold. Andy Burnham announces a halt to one of Keir Starmer's most controversial policies, the early release of thousands of prisoners. But he'll still need to come up with a solution for overcrowded jails. Oil prices soar to more than $100 a barrel as America's war against Iran spins out of control. We'll ask what the White House does next and what it could mean for us. And we'll hear what the US ambassador thinks of historical comments from the Foreign Secretary Ed Miliband that Donald Trump has lowered the bar for idiocy. And a drought is declared in Wales. But get ready for the biggest of big freezes. A warning from Greenland of winter temperatures that would freeze the Thames in central London. And could this be the last hurrah for the Commonwealth Games, which opened in Glasgow tonight with the King and Queen in a TARDIS? They're slimmed down, scaled back and smaller than at any time in the last 50 years. We discuss the day's biggest stories with the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the Chief Executive of Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace. Plus, the first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers at 1:30 the hour. Good evening, welcome to you and welcome to both of you. Around 700 prisoners due to be released early in September will now stay in jail. The scheme, which was designed to reduce prison overcrowding, would eventually have seen thousands of inmates walk free, with some only serving a third of their sentences. But the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, stepped in today to announce a pause while his government conducts an urgent review. Zoe, is that the right decision?
I mean, I think it's an unavoidable decision, but really the big untold story of prison overcrowding is that sentences have been creeping up and up and up for years. And an urgent review is all you can do about that, because the alternative is just to randomly let people out and face this outcry.
Mark?
Yeah, absolutely right decision by Andy Burnham. The fact is, just getting these letters has caused unimaginable amount of worry to victims who've received news through the post that the people they fear most who've really damaged their lives are going to be back on the streets much sooner than they should be.
Well, let's take a look now at our chief political correspondent John Craig's report on this.
The widow of PC Andrew Harper has said plans to release two of his killers early is deplorable. PC Harper, who was 28 and married for only a month, died after he was dragged by a getaway car for more than a mile in Berkshire while investigating the theft of a quad bike. Now Andy Burnham has responded to the outcry over the Harper case by ordering a pause on the early release policy, which could have seen around 700 prisoners released in September and up to 6,000 in a year. Keeping the public safe will always be my top priority, the new Prime Minister said. No prisoners will be let out under this policy until we've conducted an urgent review and done everything we can to minimise risk to the public. Where changes are needed, we'll not hesitate to make them.
The Prime Minister and I have heard from victims and survivors and from people across the country about their concerns about the implementation of some very important elements of the Sentencing Act. We've taken the decision to pause it because we want to get any implementation right, to take those views of victims and survivors to be at the heart of it.
The two killers of PC Harper, who were eligible for early release, Jesse Cole and Albert Bowers, who was 17 at the time of the crime, were jailed for 13 years for manslaughter in 2020. The driver of the car, Henry Long, was jailed for 16 years and is not eligible for early release. More victims of serious crimes say a pause on early release is not enough.
The government say the victims are a priority, but to you, their actions say otherwise.
Yeah, completely. I don't think that it's for the victims whatsoever. We haven't got an answer as victims. You know, we're still wondering what's going to happen. The whole policy needs to be rejigged and looked at properly to protect the victims.
In his first week as Prime Minister, Andy Burnham had hoped that the political agenda would be dominated by his announcements on the cost of living. But he suddenly finds himself caught up in a major law and order crisis. He has responded swiftly, but his pause on early prison releases could soon become a U-turn. And PC Harper's widow says a jail sentence should mean what a judge says it means. John Craig, Sky News.
And this pause on early prisoner release in itself causes an issue, because there will, of course, have been some prisoners who will already have been given a date for their early release.
Yeah, and I wouldn't imagine that anybody who's you know, they're at the moment firefighting the most high-profile cases. So I would imagine that they're going to pause everything, but probably start trickling out over time. The problem is that they don't have the prison places, and the people are coming up with preposterous ideas. Let's have a prison boat. Let's use unconventional forms of imprisonment. That really isn't the answer, and it isn't any sustainable way to incarcerate people.
But this pause does still have the problem remaining. I mean, it is, well, it's not kicking it into the long grass, but it's a pause.
It's kicking the can down the road a little bit.
Problems still existing.
Yes, and we still, we can see that Andy Burnham's recognised immediately how much this is a problem. I do think it's worth noting that, the case of PC Harper has gained a huge amount of attention, deservedly, because it was an appalling crime by a public servant who was out there to protect all of us from criminals. There are many, many cases like this where we have never and never will hear from the individual victims who are also on this list, particularly a lot of women and girls around the country who are specifically affected by fear that that their attackers or abusers will be back on the street, or people who have family members who have been killed and their killers will be back on the street.
But the thing is that none of those people would be off the streets forever anyway, because you wouldn't be eligible for early release if you had a full life tariff. So you're not actually dealing with people who are always going to be in prison. You're dealing with people who are coming out after 3 years instead of 4.5 years.
Yeah, which is an objectively bad thing. I think most people around the country would argue, as PC Harper's widow was quoted arguing there, that actually there's an excess of early release due to on partial serving of tariffs as it is. We know that life sentences don't mean life in this country. One of the things I think is kind of interesting, and one challenges for Andy Burnham now is he's agreed that the safety of the public is his top priority. That's as it should be. And he has to, one of the things about being Prime Minister is you have to choose. And there aren't currently enough prison places. Exactly as Zoe says, that's the source of this crisis in the first place. And that means the choice then is, well, it will take time to create more places. And in the meantime, if you can either release people early, increasing danger to the public, increasing distress to victims, or you can say, actually, you know what, convicted criminals are less important to us than the law-abiding members of the public, then they'll have to go for more overcrowding for a while. And that, I think, frankly, if you have to choose that, you have to choose that.
That's ridiculous. I'm really surprised you would even suggest that, because basically, if you willy-nilly allow overcrowding in prisons, you create unsustainable management situations. You cannot manage a prison population if those prisoners aren't treated humanely, for very simple reasons. The
public should be exposed to having more violent criminals on the streets.
Come on, you can't. You actually.
That's the choice. There's not a middle solution.
That's not the choice. You're deciding that that's the choice. That's actually not the choice.
I'd like to know what the other solution.
Well, the other solution is you need to go back and look at all the tariffs. Tariffs have crept up due to pressure from people who don't really understand offender management.
So the solution,
and there's no need for... there are many, many crimes that don't need the tariff that they've got.
So the solution to early release is simply systematise early release by having shorter prison sentences?
Well, yeah, prison sentences shouldn't be... Most judges don't think prison sentences should be as long as they are.
We don't live in a country only ruled by judges. We live in a country ruled by the public. And prison has many failings.
Just engage with the point for a second.
Prison has many,
You've got people who are absolutely at the cold face of crime and of law and order, saying
victims of crime are at the cold face.
These tariffs have crept up under pressure from people who don't understand, usually from the tabloid newspapers, and over time that creates a huge prison population, which we don't need to have. Crime is going down in this country. So why is the prison population going up?
But wait a second. Sorry, you've just
crime would not agree that their sentences aren't long enough.
Well, look. Just because the Daily Mail says that you should get this amount of time for a burglary, then the justice system shouldn't necessarily react to that.
But it's not decided by the Daily Mail, it's decided by politicians in response to voters.
Unfortunately, it is decided by the Daily Mail.
I just don't think this is coherent. You just said that sentences have crept up and up, and it doesn't work, and crime is falling.
Yeah,
well, it sounds like sentences going up and up is working, doesn't it? That sounds like great news. The fact is that
absolutely not why crime is falling. Crime is falling for so many complicated reasons.
There are many problems and failings in our prison system, not least the failure to rehabilitate, and not least the fact that too many people go into prison and come out of it with, for example, go into prison clean and come out with an addiction, which should not be the case.
And your overcrowding idea would increase addictions, and it would decrease rehabilitation.
However, one major benefit of prison, which the majority of people in this country, I strongly believe, fully appreciate, is that it keeps criminals, people who believe they have the right to use violence, to violate people's homes, their safety, their belongings, it keeps them off the street and it stops them committing crimes.
No, for a short time.
You let these people out, they will go and commit more crimes. And if that's the choice, then don't do it.
You're not making any sense. If you think prison is rehabilitative, then they shouldn't come out and commit more crime.
I said one of the failures of our prison system is insufficiently rehabilitative.
Well, it's not rehabilitative enough because the facilities are poor, the management is poor, there's overcrowding already, and people aren't treated properly in prison.
But rehabilitation is one of the end results of a prison sentence. Part of it is punishment. As well, it's supposed to be.
But you're punishing society if you let people out and they're in no way rehabilitated.
But you're saying we should let them out just earlier automatically with shorter sentences.
I've got extremely strong views about how to rehabilitate prisoners, including psychological management, including dealing with addiction and mental health problems, including treating them humanely in prison and training them for the life they're going to have outside. The prison service at the moment isn't doing any of that.
I agree.
So that's great.
You agree? So we're going to stop. Stop on agreement. We're going to move on. Let's turn to Iran now, and oil prices surged today to more than $100 a barrel for the first time since May. The sharp rise in prices was caused by the decision of Houthi rebels in Yemen to attack a Saudi tanker in the Red Sea, threatening a second blockade on Gulf oil exports. Well, let's bring in our US correspondent David Blevins, who joins us now. And this puts the real pressure on the White House now, doesn't it? This is I think it's 145 of the war with Iran, and the soundings from President Trump pushing towards escalation more than ever.
Yes, it does put pressure on the White House. The latest poll, this one from Fox News, puts support for the president's handling of the war at 39%, so 61% finding it unfavourable. And I think it's easy to see why. This was the president who told the American people there would be no more foreign wars. But this week they have watched the dignified transfer of the remains of another 4 US service personnel, their bodies repatriated to the Dover Air Base in Delaware. But this was also the president who told them he would address the cost of living crisis here at home. Instead of seeing prices coming down, they are now seeing prices going up because of what's happening with crude oil, because of what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea generally. And I think it does have escalation written all over it. All you've got to do is listen to the language. Iran responding to President Trump warning that he's going to bomb a bridge or civilian infrastructure every time they target a tanker by saying they will adopt an eye for an eye approach. And the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio then saying America will respond by adopting a head for an eye approach. And they've now gone further. The White House threatening major military punishment of Iran-backed Houthis and Iran if these strikes continue. But it seems they're not just set to continue, but to actually widen, because the Islamic Revolutionary Guard has sent senior commanders and some military equipment from Iran to Yemen now. And with no negotiations going on, at least none that we are aware of, this really has become a real quagmire for the president.
Yes, we keep saying that over and over again, but we can't overstate it. Thanks very much for the moment, David. We can see that John Craig has joined us. We're going to come to you in a moment. But first of all, to you, Zoe, in terms of this escalating, and we now have, Iran saying that the problem is the American approach is irrational, excessive and domineering, and Donald Trump saying that the Iranians haven't felt enough pain yet.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump's tone towards Iran is not, it's safe to say, begetting any kind of diplomatic solution. And he's claimed that they've been in talks. He's claimed that the talks are concluded. He's claimed a ceasefire. He's claimed that he's won the war. He's claimed that it's over so many times now that even Iran, I think, is slightly baffled by where he thinks the war is standing. But the truth is, as we've said on this show many times, he's shown them their own power with the Straits of Hormuz. He's shown them how to hold the world to ransom, and now they can. And now we're seeing a situation where he's shown the Houthis their own power, because all they have to block is the route out of the Red Sea, and they can also hold the world to ransom. So it's absolutely, just tactically, it's the most spectacular disaster for the US.
Mark, two choices Donald Trump has: escalate the war, go in harder, or negotiate.
Well, it's hard to see how you could go in much harder than decapitating the regime, killing the Ayatollah and the majority of his leadership corps. That already happened, and it hasn't produced the outcome that Donald Trump expected.
Or maybe boots on the ground, which we know is unlikely to happen.
But I don't think, when you talk to kind of people of military expertise, say UK and US, none of them are under the illusion that this is an easily soluble problem, even through that route. This is the reason why the Iranians are well prepared for this. There's no real difference between the IRGC and the Houthis. The Houthis are where they are, and they are as active and well armed as they are because the IRGC has been arming and funding and strategically directing them for many years. The Iranians wanted to put them in that position. The fact is that this is going to keep happening, and it's asymmetric. Donald Trump needs to fire millions and millions of dollars of cruise missiles, and the Iranians and their proxies, like the Houthis, need to spend a few $1,000s on land-based anti-ship missiles. It's not equivalent in terms of the cost. So you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you keep getting the same results.
Indeed. And John, tonight we read that the Iranians are drawing the UK into this conflict because they're not too happy that they're going to continue the use of British bases for American forces.
An act of aggression, the Iranians are calling it. Yes, in a week when the new Prime Minister hoped that the political agenda would be dominated by the cost of living. First of all, he's dragged into a law and order row over prisoners being released. Now a row with Iran over... Iran has hit out at the UK over the new Prime Minister simply saying he's going to carry on the same policy on Iran as the former Prime Minister. So what has happened is that Mr Burnham, of course, has let it be known that he's going to continue to allow the US to use British bases to strike, and the Iranians are saying that's an act of aggression. Of course, Keir Starmer and now Mr Burnham have always said only defensive strikes. We now learn that actually that Sir Keir Starmer, one of his last acts last Friday was a Cobra meeting following the resumption of US strikes. And of course, the new Prime Minister, of course, had a phone call with President Trump. He reassured him at that phone call that the Starmer policy would continue. There doesn't seem to have been any criticism of that so far from President Trump. But what has happened is that the Iranians have said that they strongly condemn the decision to allow the US's illegal military strikes on Iran. Any party that participates in that in any way in committing military aggression against Iran will be responsible for the consequences. Now, what the UK is doing, of course, is allowing the Americans to use, I think it's Fairford base in Gloucestershire. And, of course, more controversially, Diego Garcia, Chagos. We don't know if Mr Burnham's going to change policy on that yet. At a lobby briefing, a briefing for political correspondents earlier in the week, there was a suggestion that they might have more to say on that shortly. Anyway, what has happened tonight is a pretty punchy statement from the Ministry of Defence. New Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting, it's not in his name, it's a spokesperson, they've said, our armed forces are ready to keep the UK safe from any kind of attacks, whether it's on our soil or from abroad. The UK, this is the key quote, the UK stands ready 24/7 to defend itself. This includes through operating a layered approach to air and missile defence, provided by Royal Navy, British Army and Royal Air Force assets, equipped with a range of advanced capabilities, working closely with our NATO allies. And the statement goes on, the UK's approach to the conflict remains the same. We are committed to defending our people, our interests and our allies, acting in accordance with international law, not getting drawn into the wider conflict. Obviously,
but John,
the government doesn't want to...
does it mean that they're prepared to shoot down Iranian missiles if they attack British bases?
If they were attacking British, for example, an RAF base in Akrotiri in Cyprus, yes, the government would say that is defensive. So the answer to your question is yes. They're saying 24/7 ready to defend itself. So yes, it is an escalation. The British government would say it's not one that they have sought, but because they've not changed their policy with the change of Prime Minister. But the Iranians have reacted pretty angrily, using words like aggression, and the UK will be responsible for the consequences. So suddenly, despite no change in policy, it appears, the UK seems to be being dragged further into the conflict.
Yeah, and as you said, Andy Burnham wanting to discuss and bring his announcements on domestic policy, but with oil being $100 a barrel...
Well, that's cost of living, isn't it?
Yes, the agenda has been set for him, but it does reflect in the cost of living because it will come down to petrol prices for us here.
Well, also, I mean, it will come down to inflation. It will put inflationary pressure on, and they're looking at kind of inflation in the 3+ numbers even by autumn, which is only, 6 weeks away.
And this just shows that all those people who said... A lot of people warned Mr Burnham, it's all very well concentrating on Manchesterism and buses and the price of a pint in the pub and electricity bills and so on. You will find, as Prime Minister, that international events can drag you into phone calls with other world leaders, meetings with other world leaders and so on, and this sort of diplomatic row.
But his popularity rating, the highest since Theresa May.
Indeed, he's off to a relatively...
I don't remember Theresa May being popular.
Exactly what I was about to say. That, and that turned out really well for all involved. I think, but that's the thing. You can be, even if you happen to be disinterested in world events. I don't think Andy Burnham is, but even if you are, world events can be acutely interested in you, and it's not something where you both have to mutually agree that you're going to be affected or interested in what happens in the Gulf. The fact is, what happens there flows through exactly as Zoe says. It's inflation. Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee is meeting next week. It's meeting again in September. There are a lot of people out there who are watching their mortgages. There are a lot of people out there with loans and debts, not least the government, which has plenty of debts of its own.
Yeah, and we were talking about the cost of living, weren't we? Just a reminder for you now that Sky News has launched our new economic pressure tracker, an interactive tool which uses the latest global data to monitor how the UK is coping with the impact of the war, from inflation to food prices and the cost of fuel. You can scan the QR code on screen now to take a look. Now, the Commonwealth Games have opened in Glasgow.
Sir Chris Hoy welcoming two of the most special of guests.
King Charles and Queen Camilla made a dramatic entrance as they followed Sir Chris Hoy out of Doctor Who's TARDIS to mark the start of the Games. More than 3,000 athletes from 74 nations will compete in the Games across 10 sports and 6 parasports. Here's what the King had to say.
I extend my warmest gratitude to the city of Glasgow, to all the athletes, to the organisers, volunteers, and all those who have made this event possible. As we share our love of sport and our planet, let us build a harmonious and durable future for our families and each other.
Let's bring in now Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis now, who's at the Games for us. And Conor, it's a much scaled back event, isn't it? Is there still that sense of occasion and excitement?
Well, it depends who you speak to. You're right, this is a much more scaled down affair, but it was a royal song and dance, a good 2 hours of performances here in Glasgow. The main event clearly being the King and Queen stepping out of that TARDIS for the thousands of people who had gathered inside to watch these games officially being declared open by His Majesty the King. And clearly this was a huge first outing for Prime Minister Andy Burnham, sitting beside the King and Queen this evening for that. And these are games that, as I said, are far more scaled back than when this city of Glasgow last hosted them in 2014. And the event is trying to step out of the shadows of that moment more than a decade ago. It is the 23rd Commonwealth Games, and it was almost an event that was never taking place because the Australian state of Victoria pulled out a couple of years ago due to soaring costs. Public cash was then decided that it would not be used in an event to try and in a bid to try and lure Glasgow to take over here as well. But this is far smaller, fewer sports, fewer athletes, fewer countries taking part as a result, and they're using existing venues that were built back in 2014 as well. Now, the bosses here at Glasgow 2026 are denying that this is a diminished Commonwealth Games as a result, and they say this is about future-proofing for games of the future. But there is a big question that looms over the next couple of weeks as this event gets underway. Clearly, there is a suggestion that if this model works, then clearly it would be a blueprint for the future. But if not, it could mark the beginning of the end for what has been a major sporting event.
Thank you very much for the moment there, Conor. Just, Mark, your thoughts on whether, you know, that it is the beginning of the end, and are they still even relevant, the Commonwealth Games?
Well, I certainly hope it's not the beginning of the end. You know, the fact is it's a great sporting event with a great sporting history. Even with fewer sports in it this year, that's not really at heart the fault of either the Commonwealth or the Commonwealth Games itself. The fact is that, as Conor was saying, the Games planned for Australia fell victim to that ever-present risk. These big, even Olympics, are always teetering on the edge of being big infrastructure projects. Will they happen on time? Will they happen in budget? Can people manage to sustain them? So I hope that this is a blip, and the fact that Glasgow was able and willing to step in, it's great that that happened. I think it's still going to be a great event. I hope it goes back to where it was before for the next Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, hopefully it can, but only 10 sports, as we say, this year. In 22, there were 20 in 2014-18, so, I mean, half.
When you said that it was a slimmed-down, leaner event, I thought you were talking about Charles and Camilla. I was thinking they don't look slimmed down, they look completely normal. Look, I mean, they had to do it last minute. You can't expect them to pull it out of the... I mean, they probably think they have pulled it out of the hat. But how many sports do these people need?
Maybe it's slimmed down in the sense that the last Commonwealth Games in Glasgow had dancing Tunnocks tea cakes, which is an image that's always stayed at the opening ceremony. It's always stayed with me. The TARDIS with the King and Queen is pretty good soft power, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean... Look, if I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to name those 22 sports. So if I now started throwing my toys out of the pram about the missing ones, that would be foolish.
2,000 fewer athletes, though.
I mean, yeah, there must be, right? Because presumably the pole vaulters are missing.
I don't actually know who's missing.
I think it's just contingency. As soon as somebody's hosting them who is expecting to host them, they're going to be huge.
OK, we're rooting for the Commonwealth Games to come back bigger and stronger. We're going to take a break there. Coming up next, we'll just bring you the breaking news that's just come into us, and that is that Donald Trump will press ahead with a new 10% import tariff on UK goods after time-limited levies introduced by the President in response to a Supreme Court defeat expire on Friday. This coming from a US trade representative. So, Donald Trump to press ahead with a new 10% import tariff on UK goods. We'll bring you more on that when we come back, and we'll start by taking a look at tomorrow's front pages. Do stay with us.
hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
You are watching The Wrap. Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Well, The Telegraph leads with Andy Burnham's decision to pause the controversial early prison release scheme that was due to get underway in September. The Express reports on Reform's policy of building prefab prison cells as a solution to the capacity crisis. Mr Burnham has written an article for The Guardian insisting the opening of the No. 10 North office in Manchester will allow regional mayors a greater say in economic policy. The Star says the PM will be carrying out his duties from No. 10 North tomorrow, or as they put it, working from home. The Times says the new Prime Minister is eager to move quickly and scale up oil and gas production in the North Sea. The Metro hears that Andy Burnham is the first Prime Minister since Theresa May to enjoy a net positive approval rating from the public, but only by a margin of 3%. The Daily Mail have an exclusive report that security controls put in place by Britain's artificial intelligence experts have been tricked by all models tested. The Financial Times reports that oil prices are back above $100 a barrel for the first time since May, as Donald Trump threatens further strikes on Iran. And on a lighter note, The Star hears that former Paralympian Ade Adepitan is in talks to become the first wheelchair user to take part in I'm a Celebrity. We shall see whether that comes to fruition. But now it's all over the papers. I think he has to do it, doesn't he, really?
I think he has to do it, and they have to give him what he wants, which maybe was the point of going to the papers.
Possibly,
yeah.
We shall see. Shall we start with the Telegraph. And the story that we were leading on, and that is the pausing by the Prime Minister of the early prisoner release scheme. Front page of the Telegraph, Burnham orders halt to early release. Mark, take us into this.
Yeah, it's a pleasant experience, the first few days of a new Prime Minister in some ways. It's got rid of the awful plan to abolish trial by, or to vastly restrict trial by jury, cutting VAT on energy bills, cutting business rates on pubs and live music venues, and now halting, at least for now, while they review at the early release scheme.
Are you supporting a Labour Prime Minister?
Well, I praise any politician when I think they're doing something that's right, and I criticise ones no matter how much I like them, if I think they're doing something wrong. That's why we're here, right?
Excellent.
So, as it is on the Wrap, as it once was on the press preview, this is common sense. But the fact is that I think this is the right thing to do. It is obviously a political pressure as well as a moral question. The fact is the outrage over various of the criminals who were due to be released, including people who've committed some horrendous and infamous crimes, was only going to grow. And there are a lot of other victims out there around the country who've been receiving these letters. Quite deeply traumatic experience in itself to receive a letter saying someone who has harmed you in all sorts of unimaginable ways, who you thought was safely locked away, is now going to be back on the streets sooner than you expected. That was going to grow and grow. This isn't a permanent solution. They said they've paused it for a review. I don't think they're just trying to kick the can down the road, because they're going to have to come up with an answer. And as viewers heard earlier, there are differing views on what that answer might be.
Yeah. But the problem of prison overcrowding still exists.
Well, yeah, and that's partly why the justice system has seized up altogether, because people can't move through the system. People can't be sentenced when there's nowhere to sentence them to. And so there is, there's a kind of really perverse incentive in the whole, in the Crown Prosecution Service, that the delays in the courts are actually working in the favour of the system, because there isn't room anyway. I kind of think I think there's a ridiculous tendency in this conversation to go for these very kind of binary issues. How would a victim feel at the news that the perpetrator was being released early? They would feel bad. They must be prioritised over the perpetrator, of course. But actually, what that leaves you with is a huge number of people not really telling the truth about what's happening, and a large number of people still walking around on bail waiting to be tried and sentenced. So it's not as though we've got this kind of golden solution where we're being quite harsh on prisoners and they just have to suck up poor conditions. We've got a system in chaos in which justice isn't being served. And that's what I would worry about. But, I think probably Andy Burnham is worrying about that.
Yeah. And first, I suppose, from his point of view, first, don't make it actively worse. And I think it would make it actively worse, firstly, because you have the understandable protests of victims, but also it's only a matter of time, and we saw this with previous early release schemes before cases come up, unfortunately, where people released early go on to commit other crimes, and so I think he's making the right, indeed the only viable decision to pause this, at least for now. But they very rapidly need to come up with an answer, and obviously we need to build more prisons and create more spaces. That's not going to be a short-term answer. It's going to take time to do.
I don't agree with that. I don't think prisons are well run at the moment. I don't think tariffs are right. I think tariffs have crept up in random kind of illogical ways due to kind of pressure on one-off cases that have really forced the prison population up and up and up and up in ways that it doesn't need to be. But much more problematic, I think, is that justice is so delayed now because people aren't moving through the courts, and that's about underfunding of the courts as well. That, especially with sexual violence, people are waiting 4 years to see their perpetrator brought to justice or imprisoned. And so, a lot of victims... The Victims Commissioner described rape as having been decriminalised. Now, this is like a really, really bad situation. And when we only deal with, like, one bit of it kind of popping out of the straitjacket, we're making a mistake, I think.
Yeah, there are many issues that need to be dealt with within the justice system. Let's go back to Andy Burnham's in-train. Another thing that might impress you, Mark, he's eager to get drilling in the North Sea. Does it impress you much?
Well... Shania, yes. Contrary to that does impress me much. That's not a sentence. That's not how grammar works. But sorry, Shania. That's my fault, not hers. But yes, let's wait and see what it looks like. Mm-hmm. I mean, not coincidentally, Ed Miliband is no longer the cabinet minister in charge of this, and this was, as we know, essentially a resigning issue for him. And he became such an important minister to the government that was something that even when the previous Prime Minister and the Treasury were looking at this seriously, even when industry was calling out for it, even when politicians, particularly on the northeast of Scotland, were calling out for it, it was somewhere they could not go. And I think this does make sense. The fact is that for the foreseeable future, this country will continue to use oil and gas to some degree as part of its energy mix. And if we are not extracting it here, what we're doing is we're turning down jobs and tax revenue. We're paying often very unsavoury regimes abroad to buy it in, and incurring further emissions to ship it halfway across the planet.
Well, I'm guessing you don't agree.
Well, I totally do agree about if you're going to buy it from abroad, that there's no moral case against producing it for ourselves. I don't agree with a number of factual points, both in your argument and the Times' argument. Firstly, that Ed Miliband was really against Rosebank, and he wasn't. He was kind of much more neutral about Jackdaw because Jackdaw's the gas site, and there is a real case to finish the gas that you've got when there really isn't very much, and you're going to buy it anyway. There was
a moratorium there, wasn't there?
Well, but that wasn't his resigning issue. He was kind of open on Jackdaw, I think. But just because the resources are so slender, it wasn't worth fighting over, whereas Rosebank is different. Rosebank is a huge amount of resource ploughed into getting oil out the ground, which you've pledged to leave in the ground, for what are basically optics. This is an optics move. It's like, hi, Trump, we're still pro-fossil fuels. Hi, Daily Express, we're going to bring your energy
It's not optics to the people whose jobs it is.
But it's not going to bring energy prices down, and it's not going to have oil in the bank by October, which is the thing I take issue with in the Times reporting. The Times reporting has got a massively skewed sense of the time frame. These things take years. And furthermore, if you want to stop relying on foreign fossil fuels, the way to do that is to build renewables.
And
that is what China's doing. That is why China isn't isn't anything like as worried about the Straits of Hormuz as we are.
And with renewables as part of our energy mix, alongside things like nuclear energy, nuclear and things like gas are forms of baseload, which we do need baseload supply for consistency in the system. One thing I would say is just a slight red flag for the future of the government position on this. We've seen a growing number of lawfare court cases brought arguing that it is simply illegal to open new hydrocarbon extraction in this country on all sorts of different grounds. I expect there will be court challenges to this, and ultimately the government needs to say if this is the right thing to do, and it starts to get bogged down in elements of legalistic and indeed judicial activism on that, it's also going to need to be willing to change the law to make it possible.
OK, we've been talking about Ed Miliband's previous domain, but he's also been the subject of conversation with the US ambassador to the UK today, Warren Stevens, who's told Sky News that the new Foreign Secretary, Ed Miliband, was wrong to call President Trump a racist. He was speaking to Will Frost.
Obviously, as you said, you disagreed with him on energy policy. I imagine you disagree with him on his views towards your boss, President Trump. He said, the idea is that we have shared values with a racist, misogynistic, self-confessed groper beggars belief.
Yeah, I've read those. Those were some time ago, I think, and hopefully his views have changed. I think.
Those were 2016. 2 years later, he said Donald Trump has lowered the bar for idiocy. He said Donald Trump has a peculiar relationship with Russia. Can he really be our top diplomat dealing with America?
I would suspect his views have changed on President Trump, but I haven't talked to him about any of that.
But he was wrong then.
He was wrong then, and I think he'd be the. I mean, look, people say things, and I've said things where you come back a few years later and say, "Yeah, why did I say that? I don't think that's really right."
You can see why he's a diplomat, can't you?
I've never seen anybody wriggle on that hook so kind of comfortably. It was extraordinary. I ended up quite liking the guy.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the words up there, haven't we? The idea that we have shared values with a racist, misogynistic, self-confessed groper beggars belief. Quite clear what he thought.
It was not exactly
in 2016.
Not exactly sitting on the fences. I can't remember who it was who said that when a diplomat says yes, they mean perhaps. When they say perhaps, they mean no, and when they say no, that means they're not a diplomat. And, ultimately, that's what you see. And the fact is, they're all going to be grown-ups about it. Ed Miliband is the Foreign Secretary in His Majesty's government, and he's going to go and talk to the US, and that's his job. And they, while having occasional tantrums about, or regular tantrums about things, will talk to us too.
But then, I mean, it's a hurdle that Labour have jumped before with the previous Foreign Secretary, because David Lammy, just remind you what he said, deluded, dishonest, xenophobic, narcissistic, and a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath.
Well, I mean, like, we're all talking as though these remarks can be interpreted as wise or unwise, but that is what we're dealing with, right? I mean, you have to say it as you see it. You can't wake up like every day is a fresh day. I wonder what kind of a person Donald Trump is. We can see what kind of a person he is. This is somebody who conducts his foreign policy by threatening to decapitate people. Who conducts his foreign policy by saying he's going to raise countries to the ground. He is, in all meaningful ways, what they say about him. So you can either say, well, we just don't acknowledge reality, we're just not going to say it, we're just going to keep our heads down, or you say he's not ideal, everybody's just got to deal with what we think.
Well, as you say, they do have to work with him, and what they said in 2016, they can't say today.
I have to say that David Lammy I found terribly disappointing with his chumminess with J.D. Vance. It really beyond the call of duty. He didn't have to go fishing with him.
I confess I'm no fan really of David Lammy or J.D. Vance, as we discussed on different stories. But
would you go fishing with him?
But if I wasn't willing to, I probably wouldn't be Foreign Secretary. And I think that is one of the interesting things about this. The fact is, they said these things, and I think there's good justification for having said them. Neither of them said it when Foreign Secretary for a very good reason. And you can't live your life expecting, not that I might wake up and change my mind, but one day I might wake up and be Foreign Secretary. God forbid. One of the interesting things is that Ed Miliband, in opposition, Yeah, he criticised Donald Trump and so on. What he also did was he criticised Theresa May for not being willing to sign public letters with other states disagreeing with Donald Trump on things like the Paris climate change treaties and so on. That was a bit more of an indulgence, I think, but opposition...
We must leave it there. We must leave it there. We're going to go to the break. We can discuss in the break. But when we come back, the UK might be roasting, but there are warnings of a freezing future. We report from Greenland.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Well, hello, and thank you for watching.
Tonight on The Wrap.
We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why. He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we? No.
You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horseback military, and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Now, a drought has been declared across much of Wales following what could turn out to be the driest July in 190 years. It's the first part of the UK to declare drought status this summer. These pictures show a wildfire in Snowdonia National Park last week. 11 days later, the fire is still raging. But while Britain bakes, there's a warning from Greenland that our winters could get much, much colder. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, explains.
The Greenland ice sheet is unimaginably vast, 7 times the size of the UK and in places 2.5 kilometres thick. And like everywhere else in the Arctic due to global warming, the ice sheet is melting increasingly quickly.
This solar panel, when we installed the station in April, was at the ice surface.
Whoa, so you're telling me in 3 months, basically, the glacier has melted by that much.
Yeah.
But that's not why these teams of scientists are braving Greenland's cold, inhospitable ice sheet. They're here to predict how it threatens to bring similar conditions as this to where we live, carried on a flood of meltwater. Every trickle, every stream up on the ice sheet all comes together into one river, this river. And just looking at it, you can understand how in a big melt year, up to 500 billion tonnes of water can flood off the Greenland ice sheet and out into the sea. So much water, in fact, it might be messing with something, wait for it, called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC. The AMOC is like a giant heat-driven conveyor belt of water. Salty water flows north from the tropics, warming the climate around northern Europe and the UK. As it reaches the Arctic, the water cools, sinks, and begins a slow journey south again. But there's now good evidence the AMOC is slowing down, some experts predicting a fast approaching tipping point that shuts off the currents keeping Europe warm. Why? Well, the prime suspect is fresh water flooding off Greenland's ice sheet, acting like a giant liquid spanner in the works of the AMOC. The more Greenland melts, the more the current slows. And we end up with a climate, in wintertime at least, in northwest Europe, that's similar to Greenland, minus 20 in London in the winter. The stakes couldn't be higher, but scientists and their computer models don't all agree on the future of the AMOC. What they need is better data on how fast Greenland goes from ice to ocean. This glacier, it's like a vast tongue of ice. It must be at least a couple of kilometres across. And that's just one of more than 900 large glaciers coming off the Greenland ice sheet, and there are thousands more smaller ones. This team of scientists we're with is one of several heading out onto those glaciers this summer to get that much-needed data on Greenland's melting. Trialling a network of stations on the ice sheet that use seismic sensors to listen to water running deep below the glacier. And instruments they've built like this cryo-egg that can track the flow of water through subglacial streams hidden within the ice.
Temperature increases this much, we know this much ice will melt. Does that then go straight out underneath the ice and down to the ocean, or does it get stored and take a little longer to be released? And that's what cryo-egg can tell us.
It's science on the edge. Dropping instruments into these tunnels of meltwater called moulins takes experience. One slip and there's little chance of escape. It's complicated science in a challenging environment, to say the least, but it will help make our future a little less uncertain. Tom Clark, Sky News in Greenland.
What do you both think to that? Are we on the brink of
well, the
climate
thing is,
catastrophe?
I mean, look, I don't want to sound all guardian on you, but we've been like, I really thought that there was going to be something terrifying having happened, but actually, that is just the reality. We have lived with the reality that AMOC might or might not collapse for at least 7 years, I would say. It's great. It's the more research we can do, the better. The more everybody knows about it, the less of a surprise it will be. But yeah, no, this has been really gripping everybody with any interest in it for a really long time.
So you think it's inevitable then we'll see temperatures of minus 20 in London?
I don't think it's inevitable. The fact is that this research is taking place because, exactly as the report said, these systems are incredibly complicated. They're incredibly hard to model, and that's why this kind of research is so important. We have, albeit for seemingly very different reasons, seen temperatures falling minus 10 or thereabouts on relatively regular basis in the 17th, 18th centuries. The Thames has frozen over before. We could well see it again. I'm not saying... I said exactly... What are you about to shake?
I'm shaking my head at you because you're doing that thing where it's like, oh, we've done this before.
No,
there
I'm
was
not.
Skating in Hogarth.
I'm absolutely not. To be absolutely clear, I said for very different reasons.
Mark.
The fact is, I'm not...
We must leave it there.
You're seeing an agenda which isn't theirs.
Thank you both. More at the top of the hour.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Tonight on The Wrap, early release on hold. Andy Burnham announces a halt to one of Keir Starmer's most controversial policy, the early release of thousands of prisoners. But he'll still need to come up with a solution for overcrowded jails. Oil prices soar to more than $100 a barrel as America's war against Iran spins out of control. We'll ask what the White House does next and what it could mean for us. And we'll hear what the US ambassador thinks of historical comments from the Foreign Secretary Ed Miliband that Donald Trump has lowered the bar for idiocy. And could this be the last hurrah for the Commonwealth Games, which opened in Glasgow tonight with the King and Queen in a TARDIS? They're slimmed down, scaled back and smaller than at any time in the last 50 years. We discuss the day's biggest stories with The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the Chief Executive of Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace. Plus the first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers at 5:30. Good evening. Around 700 prisoners due to be released early in September will now stay in jail. The scheme, which was designed to reduce prison overcrowding, would eventually have seen thousands of inmates walk free, with some only serving a third of their sentences. But the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, stepped in today to announce a pause while his government conducts an urgent review. Was that the right decision, Zoe?
I think it was the unavoidable decision. I mean, spare a thought for Keir Starmer here. That was pretty much the only policy he did that was both decisive, unpopular, and he didn't U-turn on. And the first thing that happens when he gets in. I mean, I feel bad for him. From Burnham's point of view, it was unavoidable that he would have to do that, I think, but he will have to do a lot better than just bury his head in the sand. You know, he's going to have to look at tariffs across the prison service.
Mark?
Well, it's undoubtedly the right thing to do. I mean, I can't say I feel too sorry for Keir Starmer about it, because one of the elements of this that Andy Burnham is demonstrating is if you're Prime Minister, you can just do things. You can say, no, we're just not, we'll look at anything else but that. Last year, we saw those clips of people leaving prison early, popping bottles of champagne and celebrating. And a lot of people, not least their victims, but others, felt pretty sick about that. And so I think this is the right thing to do. But as Zoe says, they're going to need to find a solution.
Well, let's take a look now at our Chief Political Correspondent John Craig's report.
The widow of PC Andrew Harper has said plans to release 2 of his killers early is deplorable. PC Harper, who was 28 and married for only a month, died after he was dragged by a getaway car for more than a mile in Berkshire while investigating the theft of a quad bike. Now Andy Burnham has responded to the outcry over the Harper case by ordering a pause on the early release policy, which could have seen around 700 prisoners released in September and up to 6,000 in a year. Keeping the public safe will always be my top priority, the new Prime Minister said. No prisoners will be let out under this policy until we've conducted an urgent review and done everything we can to minimise risk to the public. Where changes are needed, we'll not hesitate to make them.
The Prime Minister and I have heard from victims and survivors and from people across the country about their concerns about the implementation of some very important elements of the Sentencing Act. We've taken the decision to pause it because we want to get any implementation right, to take those views of victims and survivors to be at the heart of it.
The 2 killers of PC Harper, who were eligible for early release, Jesse Cole and Albert Bowers, who was 17 at the time of the crime, were jailed for 13 years for manslaughter in 2020. The driver of the car, Henry Long, was jailed for 16 years and is not eligible for early release. More victims of serious crimes say a pause on early release is not enough.
The government say the victims are a priority, but to you, their actions say otherwise.
Yeah, completely. I don't think that it's for the victims whatsoever. We haven't got an answer as victims. You know, we're still wondering what's going to happen. The whole policy needs to be rejigged and looked at properly to protect the victims.
In his first week as Prime Minister, Andy Burnham had hoped that the political agenda would be dominated by his announcements on the cost of living. But he suddenly finds himself caught up in a major law and order crisis. He has responded swiftly, but his pause on early prison releases could soon become a U-turn. And PC Harper's widow says a jail sentence should mean what a judge says it means. John Craig, Sky News.
The Prime Minister today saying that keeping the public safe will always be his top priority. By saying that, he's admitting that the scheme, if it went ahead as is, would be exposing the public to danger.
No, I just wouldn't take such a binary view of it. In allowing the prison service to carry on being overcrowded and lacking capacity the way it is, there are a huge number of people who haven't been tried yet, who will be found guilty, who have been walking free for more than 2 years. So there's no way of offender management done this badly that keeps people safe. And the idea that the worst thing that could happen is somebody comes out a year less than their sentence, served a year less than they were sentenced to, is for the birds, because it's far, far worse if you've got a huge number of serious offenders walking around on bail, often in the same postcode as their victim. But it's ridiculous.
Mark, do you think that the Prime Minister could have continued the scheme but exempted serious violent crimes or sexual crimes?
Well, I'm sure that's one of the options they will have been thinking about. I don't think you can rule that out yet. It's interesting, the exact wording of his statement, as John mentioned in his report there, is that nobody will be released under the scheme until we have carried out a review and done, I don't know what the exact wording was, and done everything we can to improve the safety. That still leaves it open that they may end up doing some form of this release. I think at heart, yes, this is about victims, but it's also about protecting people who are future potential victims, who are placed at risk. And ultimately, the underlying logic of this policy of the Starmer government was that in a situation where we have prison overcrowding, we have insufficient prison space, exactly as Zoe says, we also have a lengthy backlog of cases and people who will in future be sentenced to prison sentences. They decided that rather than impose the problems of that on the prison population, on the prison service, to impose it on the public, which is what that amounts to by releasing people who will go on, some of them, to commit crimes when they would otherwise be locked away from innocent people.
The thing is, what you're talking about is concrete coffins. Keep bad people off streets forever, otherwise people aren't safe.
Not forever,
the only point of having a prison service, if you want one, is to have a prison service that turns people out rehabilitated.
That's one of the points.
No, that's the only point of having it. Otherwise, you might as well, put everybody on the Isle of Wight. There is no point in having an established offender management system unless people come out rehabilitated.
One of the points is it ought to be rehabilitation, and rehabilitation in this country is woefully inadequate. But another point is keeping people who are dangerous away from innocent people, and that is a good thing to do.
If you're interested in public safety, you want to make dangerous people safer. Otherwise, you have to keep them in prison forever. Right?
I'm strongly in favour of rehabilitation.
You also have to punish them. That's part of it, isn't it?
Fine.
There's punishment, rehabilitation and protection. This is protective of people.
It doesn't protect anybody.
By locking someone away who would otherwise kill somebody, you are protecting
people. It doesn't protect anybody unless you address whether that person's going to kill them when they come out.
But it also protects people while they are locked away from people they would otherwise hurt. That is simply... Rehabilitation is important.
Yeah, I know,
punishment is important, but protection is also important. There's a benefit of the prison system.
The whole frame of your argument is as if there's some alternative universe in which you can keep people locked up for so long that they will never be a danger to the public. Now, that is not...
That's not what I'm proposing.
Right? So whether you keep them locked up for 8 years or 4 years or 2.5 years, you need them to be back on the streets better in themselves, behaving better,
indeed,
managing their anger, their mental health better, their addiction problems solved.
Yes.
You need them to be better when they come out than they were when they went in, otherwise they pose a danger to the public. That is your priority.
But the length of time, that they set reflects their punishment, doesn't it?
It reflects the punishment, but if that time served is not going to be spent meaningfully rehabilitating, which it will not if their conditions are inhumane, the staff don't exist.
Which is why we should build more and better prisons and develop proper rehabilitation. But in the meantime,
I don't agree with that.
They should be kept away from the people they will hurt, they'll rob from, they'll menace. It's not childish. When you look at the people who've been released on licence in this country, who've gone on to beat, to rape, to rob and to kill, it's not childish to say we shouldn't allow that to happen.
I tell you what's childish. Of course
how is it childish
to sit there going, we shouldn't let people beat, rape and kill? That is childish. Everybody knows that. It's a platitude.
But you're complaining about the prospect of saying, well, let's not do it.
What I'm complaining about saying it. It's just so platitudinous.
But it seems. But I wouldn't be saying it if it wasn't in question.
Well,
if we simply agreed.
Of course, it's not in question.
But you said it's not a purpose of the prison system, a benefit of the prison system, to protect the public by locking people away.
What I'm saying
that is a benefit.
This is silly.
I wouldn't be saying if it wasn't at issue. If we just agreed on it, we could move on.
We're not agreeing on it because what I'm saying is, unless you want to lock people away and throw away the key, which you don't have enough keys and you can't afford, then you have to make a plan for doing that rehabilitation.
Very much agree.
And the way to do that is not to put them in overcrowded prisons, not to just make the sentence longer. That doesn't help.
But if we're talking about alternative fantasy lands, in the meantime, until we have the capacity...
Stop shouting over me and let me finish. The point is, you haven't got a plan. All you've got is more bigger sentences now. And what all that gives you is an overcrowded prison service in which people are let out
absolutely
around
untrue.
them.
I think people
I'm going to interject here because you're actually agreeing on the one thing that you're arguing about, which is rehabilitation.
Of course.
Wow.
Right, you do agree on that, don't you?
Very much so.
There we go. We're going to move on that point, talk about the war in Iran and oil prices, which have surged today to more than $100 a barrel for the first time since May. The sharp rise in prices was caused by the decision of Houthi rebels in Yemen to attack a Saudi tanker in the Red Sea, threatening a second blockade on Gulf oil exports. US correspondent David Blevins has more on that.
It does put pressure on the White House. The latest poll, this one from Fox News, puts support for the president's handling of the war at 39%, so 61% finding it unfavourable. And I think it's easy to see why. This was the president who told the American people there would be no more foreign wars. But this week they have watched the dignified transfer of the remains of another 4 US service personnel, their bodies repatriated to the Dover Air Base in Delaware. But this was also the president who told them he would address the cost of living crisis here at home. Instead of seeing prices coming down, they are now seeing prices going up because of what's happening with crude oil, because of what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea generally. And I think it does have escalation written all over it. All you've got to do is listen to the language. Iran responding to President Trump warning that he's going to bomb a bridge or civilian infrastructure every time they target a tanker by saying they will adopt an eye for an eye approach. And the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio then saying America will respond by adopting a head for an eye approach. And they've now gone further. The White House threatening major military punishment of Iran-backed Houthis and Iran if these strikes continue. But it seems they're not just set to continue, but to actually widen, because the Islamic Revolutionary Guard has sent senior commanders and some military equipment from Iran to Yemen now. And with no negotiations going on, at least none that we are aware of, this really has become a real quagmire for the president.
Yeah, there's no denying the complete escalation with Donald Trump saying that the Iranians haven't felt enough pain as yet.
Yes, the definition of madness being to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. But unfortunately, it's not just the Iranians who are feeling pain from this. The fact is this is flowing through. European Central Bank quoted in the Financial Times saying the inflationary effect, effectively the start of this war, is yet to fully be felt. It's going to continue to flow through. And bad news for the new government, as well as for people around the country. Cost of living impact, inflation impact, interest rate impact coming down the line.
Yeah, and with the oil over $100 a barrel, it trickles down to all of us, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it does trickle down to all of us, but everybody keeps talking as though Trump is going to, get a bloody nose in the midterms and then he's going to see sense. But I just don't know if that's how it's going to pan out.
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think he's going to... If anything does happen in the midterms, I think there is going to be quite widespread voter suppression. I think he's probably going to say that the results were a fix if he doesn't like them. I don't think he's going to draw a direct line between nobody being able to afford their gas and his policies and popularity. I just don't think he's capable of that kind of self-reflection.
And you see John Craig has joined us. And John, a development tonight in that the UK has been drawn into this war with Iran saying that they're quite displeased that Andy Burnham is continuing. I was being polite. Andy Burnham continuing the policy of allowing British bases to be used for attacks.
This is possibly the strongest war of words, I think, between the UK government and Iran. As you say, no change in policy. Mr. Burnham stuck to the Starmer policy of, yes, defensive strikes, yes, the use of Fairford in Gloucestershire for the Americans, and also, more controversially, Diego Garcia, the Chagos. But what has happened that's sparked this real war of words tonight is a reaction from Iran, with accusing the British of allowing the US to use British bases is an act of aggression, they say. Now, the Ministry of Defence has hit back. New Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting, of course, but this is from a spokesperson, basically saying, look, you attack any of our bases in Cyprus or anything like that, we'll shoot you down, potentially. Our armed forces are ready to keep the UK safe from any kind of attacks, says the MOD, whether it's on our soil or from abroad. The UK stands 24/7, ready 24/7 to defend itself. They're talking about whatever, a layered approach, whatever that is. Air and missile defence, Navy, Army, Royal Air Force assets, equipped with a range of advanced capabilities. That means drones, it perhaps does, working closely with our NATO allies. And they say the UK's approach to the conflict remains the same. Yes, we knew that. We're committed to defending our people, our interests, our allies, acting in accordance with international law, not getting drawn into the wider conflict. It's a pretty tough statement. It's more than the normal sort of diplomatic language you might expect. Yes, Mr Burnham has let it be known that he backs the Starmer approach. We now know that on Friday, Sir Keir, in one of his last acts, held a Cobra meeting following the resumption of those US strikes. He agreed to back again further American use of the bases. Fairford in Gloucestershire is one, and of course Diego Garcia. But it just shows, doesn't it, in his first week as Prime Minister. First of all, we've been reporting today about this law and order crisis, if I can call it that, and now suddenly it's all flaring up internationally, with Britain being attacked, verbally anyway, by the Iranians, and forced to hit back. All meanwhile, he's up in Manchester tomorrow, talking about buses and Manchesterism and various things, and meanwhile, it's all kicking off in Iran.
Yeah, some of the papers are describing it as a work-from-home day for him on the Friday.
Certainly not a fee up on the coffee table day, given everything that's going on. And as I said before, the fact is that these are unavoidable, intractable problems that are bigger than just the United Kingdom. They're bigger than any individual government, but they're still things that could very easily derail him. We've already seen, or at least his agenda, we've already seen some incoming fire from Starmerites this week about whether things are funded or not from various of his plans on, say, energy taxation. He's got a really big budget to prepare for in the autumn, along with his new Chancellor, and Donald Trump and the Iranians flowing through to economic impact at home is already going to start making that harder.
Yeah, slightly derailed from the agenda that he wanted to set, because, it was about the cost of living and the basic tax concessions that he wanted to make. But this is what happens when you're Prime Minister. You have to deal on the international stage.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to play the hand you're dealt. It's not going to be easy. And, somebody who was kind of talking earlier about how they did warn Andy Burnham about how difficult this was going to be. I mean, I think they could have just done that as a kind of broad spectrum. It's just much harder than it looks, governing, per se. But I don't know that the kind of clash of words, the bellicose language coming out of Iran, I don't think is going to be his biggest worry. Because he wanted this to be a kind of cost of living day. Nobody's talking about the cost of living because they're talking about threats to the cost of living in a kind of inadvertent way. But he'll get his cost of living day back, no question. And I don't think he's going to overreact to Iran seeing us as kind of part of the war tapestry.
Well, we are going to continue discussing the cost of living because we have launched our new economic pressure tracker, an interactive tool which uses the latest global data to monitor how the UK is coping with the impact of the war, from inflation to food prices and the cost of fuel. You can scan the QR code on screen now to take a look. Advert over. Now, the Commonwealth Games have opened in Glasgow.
Sir Chris Hoy welcoming two of the most special of guests.
King Charles and Queen Camilla made a dramatic entrance as they followed Sir Chris Hoy out of Doctor Who's TARDIS to mark the start of the Games. More than 3,000 athletes from 74 nations will compete in the Games across 10 sports and 6 parasports. Here's what the King had to say.
I extend my warmest gratitude to the city of Glasgow, to all the athletes, to the organisers, volunteers, and all those who have made this event possible. As we share our love of sport and our planet, let us build a harmonious and durable future for our families and each other.
I'm going to put John on the spot because he's still with us. Are you looking forward to the Commonwealth Games, John?
I must admit, I'm more of a World Cup fan, I think, than athletics and all that.
Are you sad about the World Cup being over?
Of course.
Yeah.
and Argentina aren't in the Commonwealth Games, which is the really exciting part.
Thank
of
goodness.
They were a disgrace.
But this year, a much scaled-down event, only 10 sports as opposed to, I think, in 2022, 20. So is it sort of dying slowly? Is it on its way out, the Commonwealth Games?
Well, I certainly hope not. The fact is that the reason why it's been scaled down is not due to a structural issue with the Commonwealth or the Commonwealth Games. It's due to a specific crisis that happened with the original planned venue in Australia, where they ended up pulling the plug. They said, we can't deliver this, the budgets are overrunning. I think people often forget that even the Olympics, quite regularly with venues, runs really close to teetering on the edge of not being finished in time, costing too much, coming at too great a domestic cost to the host cities. You remember the Athens Olympics was a huge risk of that. Glasgow stepped in, saved the day. Huge credit to Glasgow for doing that. I've got to give a shout out. My brother-in-law, the last Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, was on the pitch at the opening ceremony as Clyde, the mascot. They got one of several Clydes. I think there's all the dancing Tunnocks tea cakes around him and stuff.
Name check there.
So well done to Glasgow. Absolutely well done to Glasgow for stepping in. I don't see why it should have to be the start of a decline or the end of the Commonwealth Games. These things happen. It's happening. It's going to be a great festival of sport, and fingers crossed for the future.
Very quickly, are you optimistic?
Yes.
OK, we can leave it there.
Did so quickly.
Consensus breaks out.
Yes, she says. We'll leave it there. Coming up, the US ambassador to the UK tells Sky News that the new Foreign Secretary, Ed Miliband, was wrong to call President Trump a racist.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
You are watching The Wrap. Now, the US Ambassador to the UK, Warren Stevens, has told Sky News that the new Foreign Secretary, Ed Miliband, was wrong to call President Trump a racist. He was speaking to Wilfred Frost.
Obviously, as you said, you disagreed with him on energy policy. I imagine you disagree with him on his views towards your boss, President Trump. He said, the ideas that we have shared values with a racist, misogynistic, self-confessed groper beggars belief.
Yeah, I've read those. Those were some time ago, I think, and hopefully his views have changed. I think
those were 2016. 2 years later, he said Donald Trump has lowered the bar for idiocy. He said Donald Trump has a peculiar relationship with Russia. Can he really be our top diplomat dealing with America?
I would suspect his views have changed on President Trump, but I haven't talked to him about any of that.
But he was wrong then.
He was wrong then, and I think he'd be the. I mean, look, people say things, and I've said things where you come back a little, a few years later and say, "Yeah, why did I say that? I don't think that's really right."
Give that man a raise.
I was just thinking, though, I don't believe him. I don't think he ever has said anything hasty and then gone back a few years later and gone, I don't think that was right.
It was very gracefully.
He smiled the whole way through.
It was very gracefully handled. You've got to say, ask the best questions, the ones where you already kind of know the answer they're going to have to give in some ways. And it was gracefully handled.
Yeah.
The fact is that, so it should be, he's the ambassador to our country, to the United States. He can leave it to the president and the vice president to say off-colour, unpleasant and shooting from the hip things, and his job is to be a grown-up and stay friends.
But we are reminded that the vice president himself said some quite uncomplimentary things about Donald Trump, and he still became vice president. Described him as being like Hitler.
Yeah, I think he might be America's Hitler, was his kind of what's comment.
But also, I mean, Trump has said a lot about Keir Starmer. I mean, they don't abide by normal rules of etiquette and politeness. They just don't. So I don't think it's as big of a deal as maybe people are worrying.
But we do know that Donald Trump is quite thin-skinned.
Well, he is thin-skinned, but
and actually, he was briefing against Ed Miliband to be the Chancellor, so he's already got beef with him.
He is thin-skinned, but he also has a remarkable capacity just to kind of turn on a sixpence and go, oh, well, I kind of get on with the guy. And,
exactly.
And we saw this with J.D. Vance being so friendly with David Lammy, and they seem to kind of find some kind of rapport.
And also Trump and Mamdani. I mean, Mamdani had been calling him a fascist up and down Manhattan for months, and that's how he got elected. And then he sort of wants to be in with the in crowd, and if that in crowd happens to be Ed Miliband, he'll suck it up, I think.
This is also just the reality of diplomacy and politics, isn't it? That actually they have to deal with, to some degree, they have to deal with the world as it is. And that particularly is the case when you are the partner in the discussion, which is not the United States, but the United Kingdom. And, Ed Miliband's a grown-up when it comes to politics. He knows he's got a job to do, and he'll... you won't be going around to the White House and saying these things to his face now.
We hope.
I think you're very unlikely.
It would be funny.
All eyes on their first.
It would be funny, though.
It would be disastrous. He's not going to do that. Should we see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers for you now? Well, The Telegraph leads with Andy Burnham's decision to pause the controversial early prison release scheme that was due to get underway in September. The Express report on Reform's policy of building prefab prison cells as a solution to the capacity crisis. Mr Burnham has written an article for The Guardian insisting the opening of Number 10 North office in Manchester will allow regional mayors a greater say in economic policy. The Star says the PM will be carrying out his duties from number 10 North tomorrow, or as they put it, working from home. The Times says the new Prime Minister is eager to move quickly and scale up oil and gas production in the North Sea. The Metro hears that Andy Burnham is the first Prime Minister since Theresa May to enjoy a net positive approval rating from the public, but only by a margin of 3%. Meanwhile, the Eye reports that new Chancellor John Healey is set to make state pensioners with no other income exempt from income tax. The Daily Mail have an exclusive report that security controls put in place by Britain's artificial intelligence experts have been tricked by all models tested. The Financial Times reports that oil prices are back above $100 a barrel for the first time since May, as Donald Trump threatens further strikes on Iran. And on a lighter note, The Star hears that former Paralympian Ade Adepitan is in talks to become the first wheelchair user to take part in I'm a Celebrity. Get me out of here. We missed the rest of the title. Let's start with the Telegraph, and this is the Prime Minister pausing the early release prison scheme.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had to do it. There wasn't any. It was the optics were bad. The pressure on him was great. It wasn't his decision to begin with. He didn't look like he wanted to stand by it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think he had an option.
Mm-hmm. But it has been decisive, though, hasn't it, Mark?
Well, it's been decisive within its own limit. He obviously, he spent a long time hoping to become Prime Minister, and he spent quite a long time planning for this specific route to become Prime Minister. So he will have given a lot of thought, as will the team around him who've been working at least on this campaign for the last year, from what they've said publicly, to how long your window of opportunity is to start to set expectations, to set out your agenda, to introduce yourself to the public, but also to clean the stables of the policies you've inherited. And the last thing they would have wanted, exactly as Zoe says, they had to do this because the last thing they would have wanted would be for their first few weeks to be dominated by trying to stand by a policy they didn't design or choose in the first place. It is only for now. He leaves it open with his statement. No prisoner will be released until we have done this review and put in place what measures we can. I think it's entirely possible you'll see a narrowing down of the category of prisoner, but even that's always going to be imperfect, and it's not going to be popular when it comes.
But he will be tested severely on how long this review takes as well.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can't be an infinite delay measure, which, you can imagine governments when it would have been that. Boris Johnson's government, it would have been that. But he'll know that he can't delay it for very long, because otherwise he's just got the same problem that Keir Starmer had this as response to, which is overcrowded prisons don't work properly.
Yeah. Also in his in-tray business rate cuts for pubs and clubs. This is inside the Times, page 6 and 7, Mark.
Yes, and, understandably, the hospitality sector on various fronts, Tom Kerridge or UK Hospitality, the industry body, have said that this is sticking plaster is a limited amount, but it is a move in the right direction. It does recognise that there are genuine problems for that sector still. Interestingly, one of the themes that's already coming through, and Andy Burnham wouldn't necessarily say this as the grand theory, is that if you want to address the cost of living, a major component of cost of living in this country is now tax, whether that's the VAT and other measures on energy bills, whether that's the business rates that apply to hospitality and businesses. I think he's doing the right thing by doing this, but it can only be a start.
Yeah, it's
Kemi
interesting.
Badenoch saying he's not being ambitious enough, but
well,
she would say that, wouldn't
I
she?
actually interviewed Tom Kerridge the other day, and the situation restaurateurs describe is absolutely brutal. They're often, if you look at a plate of food, like fancy food, they're often making 50p profit on a plate that's cost 36 quid.
And pennies on a pint of beer.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. So I think they're working really hard in an incredibly challenging environment, and you can't write off the fact that you can't pass on energy costs to the customer. You can't really pass on food inflation to the customer. All you can do is make less profit. So they'll be heartened by the fact that at least the government's noticed that. Whether or not...
Is it enough?
I don't think it will be enough, but...
I think if we were to look at areas which I think would make more sizable difference, and while he's going through this process of removing Starmer government policies, yes, business rates have an impact, but particularly for hospitality and similar businesses, employers' national insurance hit a lot of these really, really hard.
I think if he
to run your business.
if he starts unwinding that, I mean, I don't want to sound childish myself, but everybody's going to want that. If he starts unwinding it for pubs, charities are going to want it. Everybody's going to want it.
Of course. And that is one of the challenges for Andy Burnham in some ways, that he is somebody who is likeable, but he likes to be liked. And part of being Prime Minister means choosing sometimes winners and losers, and that's going to be the real test for him. At the minute, he's making some early steps against the background, as we said, of war and all the rest of it. But he's going to have to start choosing.
Yeah, and he will have to disappoint somebody at some point. Let's talk about number 10, North. Is it a gimmick? Is it going to work?
Originally, I was incredibly sceptical. I was as sceptical of this as I ever have been of anything, because especially when Burnham won Makerfield, but before he'd made his kind of pitch to the country, he was talking in these quite pugilistic terms about how the North had been governed by London for too long, and it bugs me, that kind of language, because it sort of ignores the existence of a working class life in London. It acts as though the only people who've ever been left behind are in the North East. It acts as if there's no such thing as poverty in Cornwall. It drives me mad. And I also think it's a kind of needless, it's a bit like kind of, you know, a pantomime where you get the left-hand side to shout louder than the right-hand side. It's just irritating. But then I suddenly thought about it today and thought, actually, quite a lot of the problem with kind of political narratives and the way politics kind of unfolds in this kind of, you know, drumbeat of everybody asking the same questions, everybody having the same response, everybody going to the same pollsters, all the polls saying the same thing, is because of this kind of Westminster stranglehold of outlook as much as of geography. And I think it will get out of the Beltway. I think people will talk differently about things in Manchester. I think it's going to make a difference that there's a kind of quite a strong Green voice up there, and people, you know...
And it's not just him. He's going to send other ministers there as well and revive the National Economic Council.
Yeah, the simple fact is we don't yet know how number 10 North is going to work. It's not quite clear how long in a given week the Prime Minister is going to be there. Remember, he's also an MP. He does vote in Parliament. He needs to obviously take PMQs midweek. You would expect a Prime Minister often to be back in their constituency or elsewhere Thursday afternoon, evening through to Sunday, for example, often. I would say, as somebody from the North East, it is quite important to remember that the North is not just one big Manchester. And actually, you know, the North, there's a lot of difference across the Pennines. It takes you as long to get to Manchester on the train from Newcastle as it does to get to London. They can feel just as distant. And exactly as Zoe says, there are places in the south of England that have more in common with equivalent places in the north of England, coastal towns not least, like the one I grew up in, than more in common with one another than they necessarily do with well-to-do parts of their own regions. This is more complicated than just black and white.
No, I do take your point about the North not being one homogenous blob, as we sometimes describe it. Point well made. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll take a couple of the stories in tomorrow's newspapers. Do stay with us.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
We're still taking you through the papers with Zoe and Mark. Let's start off with the Metro. And Andy Burnham ahead on, it says pints, but it's...
See what they did there?
Yes, I see what they did. It's actually points, because he's the first Prime Minister since Theresa May with a net positive approval rating of 3%. Slim, but it's still positive.
Yes, it's a measure of quite how unpopular and polarising a lot of political leaders have been for many years, that you have to go back to Theresa May, start of Theresa May's premiership, and that this is a 3% positive lead. Part of what we're seeing, I think, is that when you see these positive, negative kind of net ratings, obviously people who say don't know are not in that mix. And a lot of what's happening now is that why the Prime Minister is focusing on cost of living and saving pubs and so on, is starting to shake out those undecideds to see where they go. You've got to try and get this number as high as you can, because this is going to be pretty much the most popular he is. Because the harder decisions start to happen, world events start to intervene, and that's the nature of
I mean,
business.
I don't think it does anybody any favours to be too popular at the beginning, because it's just like, it shrouds
The only way is down.
Well, yeah, and people sort of get blamed for your own disappointment in them, and that's very much what happened to Keir Starmer, I think, because I knew why I didn't like him, but I didn't know why everybody else didn't like him.
And then they like you again after they've got rid of you and made you cry.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like people invested so much hope in him, and then he disappointed it, and then they blamed him for that, and I could see why. But you don't. If you're Andy Burnham, you want people to bet on you, but you don't want them to have all their eggs in your basket.
Luke Trill tweeting that Burnham's approval rating jumps to +13, which is higher than Starmer's post-election, which was his highest, and that was +11. So he's still doing a lot better than Burnham. But what's really interesting is for the first time, both the PM and the Leader of the Opposition are both in positive net approval, with Badenoch at +3.
Indeed, and obviously and that's part of Badenoch's kind of step-by-step improvement in her personal ratings, which notably has still not started to be matched to her party's rating in the opinion polls.
She's much higher than her party.
Yes, and she's shown a continued improvement in her ratings, overtaking Farage and all the rest of it, going through that Starmer decline, but her party is yet to pick up the same kind of trend. I think it's interesting. I mean, Starmer did have high approval ratings at the start, but he actually very early after the election set out to try and manage those expectations down. He tried to roll that pitch where they suddenly said, there's this great big black hole, we're going to make tough decisions, here's the winter fuel. And that was a jarring thing, because by omission, he'd allowed people to project a lot of expectations onto him that he then suddenly, handbrake turned on.
Yeah, sorry, that's what my kids say, is jarring. When they disagree with something, it's jarring.
This is my Gen Z.
or vibe, that's the other word that's hot in there.
Yeah, while we're on Badenoch, please can we talk about her not letting Grant Shapps in?
OK, let's go to the Telegraph. Yes, Kevin Badenoch won't let Grant Shapps stand again. Why?
Because she says she wants a new party for new people, which I think is I think her high approval ratings are ridiculous, because I don't think she's thinking straight. I mean, I don't think she's showing any... This is going to sound ridiculous coming from me, but I don't think she's showing any respect for the DNA of her institution. It's a big deal, a political party.
Yeah. Kemi Badenoch has blocked Sir Grant Shapps from standing for the Tories at the next election.
And this is something...
He was the former Tory co-chairman.
He was the former Tory party chairman. Actually, I think I saw James Heal from The Spectator tweeting earlier that a friend of Grant Shapps had been in touch to say it's surprising to see this treatment for a former chairman of the Conservative Party who won an election, which is starting to get a bit spiky. They're in the middle of this rebuilding of the Conservative candidates list. They've got a lot of people, including quite a lot of former MPs, applying to be on the candidates list, to be eligible to be candidates. And Kemi Badenoch has made quite a big deal in the last couple of weeks about the fact that not all of them are making it. Some on policy grounds, position on net zero, ECHR. Part of that is that she knows that there are a sizable chunk of former Conservative voters who are extremely sceptical about potentially voting Conservative again until they see the Conservative Party isn't what they felt to be too watered down in the Cameron era.
We must leave it there for the minute, Mark, and say thank you very much for the moment. Coming up, how it all went wrong for England's Charlie Hull on day one of the Women's Scottish Open.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why. He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No. You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who, he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horseback military, and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Time now to get all the very latest sports news with Jessica.
Right, let's talk Wimbledon. And from a British perspective, the real headline has come from breakthrough star Arthur Ferry, who was handed a wild card to the tournament but progressed to the semi-final. As you can see, very pleased to say that Arthur joins me now. Arthur, really good to see you. Huge congratulations. What a journey you've been on the past fortnight. Can you even begin to start to sum it up?
Yeah, it's been an incredible fortnight. 6 matches and lots of firsts for me. It's going to take a while to all sink in and process it all, but yeah, it's been incredible.
Because you look at the stats, I mean, you became only the second wild card in men's singles history to make it to the semi-finals. You were ranked 114th in the world when you entered this tournament. Before it began, did you ever imagine that you could get through to the semi-finals?
Yeah, I've always had a lot of self-belief in my ability to play against the top players in the world, and yeah, it was just a matter of stringing wins together, and you know, in those slams, if you want to do well, you have to win a lot of matches. So yeah, that was the case. Past 2 weeks, I was able to back up wins with more good tennis and keep going. So yeah, I've always had the self-belief, and it was, yeah, in my eyes, just a matter of time.
And of course, beyond that second round in the singles, you were kind of Britain's only hope as we went through the tournament. Did you feel that level of expectation a lot more as the tournament progressed?
Not so much. I mean, I think there was a lot of attention anyway as a Brit, and yeah, the last Brit definitely contributed to that as well. But no, I was just trying to focus on myself and yeah, play for myself and just focus on one match at a time.
One of the matches that a lot of people are talking about is that Grigor Dimitrov match, because he's so well loved at Wimbledon as well. You then also beat Caboli in straight sets. When you were playing those matches, how are you feeling in yourself? Because these guys, you know, seeded in the top 10 in the world, and you're beating them. Does that make you think, you know, I can really compete against these guys?
100%. The match against Dimitrov was, yeah, my first one on centre court and the second 5-set win in a row, so it was really a special moment. And then playing Caboli in quarters, my first quarter-final in a Grand Slam. He'd done it before, but I felt like I was really confident that I could beat him. I'd beaten him in Australia, and that really helped me to believe that I could get it done.
Yeah. Then the game against Alexander Zverev. What are your takeaways from that one?
Yeah, it was another step up against Alex Zverev. Yeah, an incredible player. He was riding off that win at Roland Garros and was playing with a lot of confidence. Very tough to return his serve, and he was playing freely. So difficult, but yeah, a lot of.
On to the weather now.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, tomorrow will be mainly dry, with heatwave conditions continuing in the southwest, but it'll turn cooler and more unsettled over the weekend. Most places will have a fine start tomorrow, but there'll be a little rain in the north, mainly the northwest. England, Wales and the south of Ireland can expect plenty of sunshine through the morning. Elsewhere, there'll be more in the way of cloud, with just a few showery outbreaks. The wind will pick up there too. It will be warm again, locally hot in the south. Sunshine will develop more widely through the afternoon, but northern Scotland will see thicker cloud and patchy rain.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
That was the wrap. Thanks for watching, and do stay with us. Mario will bring you all of the news throughout the night. All the top stories coming up right here.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.